And I am going to introduce instructor Clive Salzer, and he's presenting today. So I'm going to hand it over to Clive right now. Thank you, Clive.
Thank you, Donna Lee. This talk has changed, has evolved 3 times actually. And the third evolution of it is that it's going to be about evolution. So I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Okay, so today we're going to actually go back in time, and we're going to try to understand what Arthur meant by the evolvement of the original concept. And this is the front of Arthur Lincoln Paul's book, his autobiography book. And in it, you can see there are 3 codes or symbols to capture the essence. He's captured the essence of orthobionomy in his book. The first one, of course, is the name, orthobionomy. The second one is this, the philosophy which is captured in this statement, the evolvement of the original concept. And the third symbol or code is this image of a sand dollar, which is our logo, orthobionomy logo. So the word orthobionomy, when it's translated, means correcting in accordance with the laws of life, natural laws of life. And this runs right through the whole evolution of orthobionomy. And it's saying actually that it's not the therapist. It's not me who's doing it. It's actually nature that does it. What I do is create the conditions to allow nature to do the work. And the words we call it self-correction. So the philosophy of orthobionomy in this statement, the evolvement of the original concept. Now, did Arthur mean for this to be like a koan, like something that has no real answer, it's just there to contemplate? Well, it could be. And that's what we're going to try and puzzle out today. So the dictionary definition of the word evolvement means to evolve from simple to complex. And here we have a little image of a mustard seed and a huge mustard tree. But what do you think is the meaning of the original concept? So we're going to look at this tree, the tree of knowledge of orthobionomy. We're going to start at the roots, we're going to travel up to the leaves, and we're going to see if we can answer this question today. And the third symbol, of course, is the sand dollar, which is the exoskeleton of a starfish, which is found in great abundance on beaches around the world. So this has many interpretations, but I'm going to give you my interpretation, which is that there's 5 open arms, or open arms in 5 directions, embracing all. So I think that this symbolizes Arthur's vision of orthobionomy in every home. Anyone can join in the orthobionomy community. There are no prerequisites. So we're going to start our journey in the roots of the tree in 200 years ago to this man called Arthur Taylor Stills, who is the creator of osteopathy. So our roots lie in osteopathy, which is a form of manual therapy that is very famous throughout the world, and there are thousands of practitioners. So A.T. Stills was born in 1828 in a log cabin, much like this one, in Virginia, in the USA. In his 20s and 30s, he trained as a medical doctor. And in those days, you did your training via apprenticeship with his father. So his father was also a doctor. His father was also a Methodist minister and was also a missionary. And his missionary work he did with the Shawnee Native Americans in the Shawnee Nation. And so as a young man following on with his father, A.T. Stills took these people into his heart. He learned the language, the Shawnee language. He lived with them and like them, and he took on their lifestyle, their nature-centric lifestyle, their healing methods, and their belief system. So perhaps we get a clue here that perhaps the first seed or influence on orthobarnami, which is correcting in accordance with the natural laws of life, is based on indigenous wisdom. So in his late 30s, in 1861, the American Civil War broke out. And Dr. Still served as a doctor on the battlefield. This war, there were 600,000 soldiers were killed, which is equivalent these days to 6 million. And that is more than in all of the other American wars put together. And Dr. Still witnessed the limitation of medicine to treat wounds before antiseptics and antibiotics were around. But he developed a passion for anatomy because he had to sew people up and perform amputations and other things. And in 1864, Dr. Still returned from the Civil War and faced a grave personal crisis. 3 of his children had died from an epidemic of spinal meningitis that swept through the area. Previously, his first wife had died from childbirth complications. And a month after the epidemic, the daughter from his second wife died of pneumonia. So his inability to save his family, coupled with his grim experiences as a Civil War doctor, led Dr. Still to reject most of what he'd learned about medicine and search for new and better methods. And this is the first aha statement, first aha moment of orthobarnami history. Dr. Still was fascinated with studying anatomy, bones, muscles, and organs. And here he is, teaching anatomy with a real cadaver. He believed that most diseases can be alleviated without drugs. The key, he found, is to find and correct anatomical deviations that interfere with the free flow of blood and nerve force in the body. So perhaps this is the beginning of orthobarnami postural assessment, leg length differences, bilateral asymmetries, loss of range of motion, and so on. So he started osteopathy, calling himself a lightning bone setter and magnetic healer. And he met a lot of resistance from the medical profession. Here he is looking at bones with a colleague. Here he is sitting in the garden with his wife, surrounded by bones and illustrating an anatomy book. Can you see this? Everybody can see that? And this is a quote of his own words written in his autobiography, and it's his description of his aha moment. I spent 30 years of my life reading and following rules and remedies used for curing, and learned in sorrow it was useless to listen to their claims. I asked for and obtained a mental divorce from them, and I wanted to be understood that drugs and I are as far apart as the East is from the West, now and forever. I will follow the dictates of nature. And this is also in his words in his autobiography. I have discovered that nature is never without necessary remedies. I am better prepared today to say that God or nature is the only doctor whom man should respect. Man should study and use the drugs of his drugstore. So you can see here that he's relating nature and God together, and that's the importance he's placing, and he's honoring the great power of self-correction. And this sounds indigenous to me. I don't know about you, but this is what the Aboriginals believe, that God and nature are the same thing. And you can see he's doing nothing, right? Which is symbolic that he's letting nature do the work. He's not doing it himself. So this is also from his writings. All channels to and from the heart must be cleared from all hindrance. No nerve can do its part unless it be well nourished. If not, it will fail to execute its part for want of power. For by it, all blood must flow. So this is our principle of orthobiology. The rule of the artery is supreme. So nerve force power is the cause. Interesting that in Chinese Qigong system, blood is seen as yin qi, and qi, life force itself, is seen as yang qi. So the interconnection between nerve force and blood is there. And so he's saying that the blood supply is the condition. So we don't fix things, we create the conditions for the body to fix itself and nature to fix itself. And one of those conditions is opening the blood channels. And here we have an image which really shows the concentration of blood vessels in the head and feet. So you can see how the rule of the artery is supreme. Another quote here. He, the osteopath, should never dally with the effect, but ever go back to the cause, which when corrected results in the disappearance of the effect. So he likens the pain or the symptom, he calls it an effect. But you should go back to the cause, which he sees in the blood flow and in the nervous system. So this is a picture of the human nervous system, which you can see permeates or pervades the whole human body. And you can see the concentration here of the nerves in the spinal cord and around the eyes and in the brain. So there are trillions, somebody said 20 trillion, interconnections of nerves, synapses in the body, and signals in the nervous system travel around 100 meters per second. So it would be impossible to consider that any part could be separated from any other part in the body. So this is where we get the principle of body unity. So here is the summary of the ideas or the roots of orthobiology brought to us by A.T. Still. So, number one, disease can be alleviated without drugs. Yes, you can use your hands instead. 2, what you need is to harness the body's natural self-correcting power. So there's self-correction. 3, you can support self-correction through anatomical alignment. So there's our principle that structure governs function. And the osteopathy method is to use HVLA, which is high velocity, low amplitude moves, which is like a jigging type of movement, which perhaps is a preview of the compression that we use in phase 4. 4. So this alignment unblocks the blood and other fluids, which restores the nerve force. And there's our principle, rule of the artery is supreme. And health occurs when the nerve force, whether that's life force, bio force, is restored. And that would be our principle of body unity. So that's the roots of the Orthobarnumi wisdom tree. And we're now going to go to the trunk of the tree. And to look at that, we look at the life of Lawrence Jones, who was an osteopath, who discovered and created a new osteopathic technique, which is quite different from the traditional osteo techniques. He called the technique the Jones strain counterstrain technique. And this is his book, front of his book, which is now an important part of all osteopathic training. And it's also used by massage therapists around the world. So Dr. Jones was born and raised in Washington, USA. His father died when he was 10, leaving his mother to rear a family of 4 children on a teacher's salary. It was also the time of the Great Depression. So to help the family finances, the children had to take jobs in the holidays. And in summer, Larry worked in the apple orchards. One day, while he was picking apples, a friend of his fell from a nearby tree and was lying on the ground, unable to walk. Larry's father, luckily, was an osteopath who came to the orchard with his table. And after one treatment, his son, Larry's friend, could get straight back to work. So right then, Larry decided to become an osteopath when he grew up. And he graduated from the Californian College of Osteopathic Medicine in 1936 at the age of 24. During the Second World War, 1939-45, because medical doctors were required in battle zones, he worked as a medical doctor in the emergency room in the local hospital, and he delivered many babies. After the war, he returned to osteopathy private practice. So all of you who have done phase 4 introduction would have heard the story of Dr. Jones's great discovery. A patient was referred to him who had acute back pain. And so he ended up propping him up on pillows. And you know the story, when he came back, he was healed, right? So, but you may not have heard Dr. Jones telling the story himself.
Okay. The thing I think to help get you in the right philosophy of this thing is just for me to tell you what happened to me when I learned it. And this was not because I was so brilliant and figured out this wonderful thing. I just stumbled over it by accident and learned it because it was so much better than what I'd been doing before. I graduated in 36 and didn't think too much of my abilities for a long time. I was getting maybe 2 out of 3 pretty good do that I was proud of, and about 1/3 that I wasn't very proud of. And I thought, gosh, I ought to be doing better than this. And I wasn't doing any better than that, or not much better anyhow. An awful lot of guys, I just didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I didn't get much done for them. And I kind of took in every course that I could, just kind of like you people are doing, trying to learn anything I could, and I didn't learn enough to do much good for, well, I'd practiced for 19 years. And I just stumbled over this one. Fella had 2.5 months of treatment by 2 chiropractors and had done him no good. He was a young man, about 35 or so. That's pretty young for me. And he had a psoas spasm and he couldn't stand up straight. And I thought, well, I'll have to fix him up and show him what I can do. What I could do was absolutely nothing. I didn't do him a bit of good in 6 weeks, and I was going up the wall trying to figure out something I could do to help the poor guy. And he said, well, maybe if I could sleep nights, I might. You don't sleep very well. Oh, hell, I sleep for 15 minutes and wake up and try to find a position to sleep in and sleep for a few more minutes. And that's what I do all night long. I never do get much sleep. And okay, I thought, gosh, I haven't done anything else. Maybe I can help the guy find a comfortable position to sleep in. And so I started twisting him this way and that, and he wasn't able to go a lot of ways at all, but there were some ways he could go very nicely. So we went where we could, and little by little I kept asking him, how do you like this? That's a little better, and so forth. We went on. Finally, after about 20 minutes of twisting him, I had him in a grotesque, funny-looking position with his knees all rolled up and twisted off to one side and side bent, a little of everything, but he was comfortable. He was very much less pain than he'd ever had. And he was beginning to take an interest in this thing. This is the only good anybody had done for him in 4 months. And he was all smiles suddenly. And enough so that I didn't have the guts to straighten him out again. And so I propped him up in this funny position while I went to see another patient. Came back and he was still happy as a clam. Just delighted with the whole thing. And I gave him a little talk about how he should try to find this thing when he went to bed that night. And he said, it looks funny, I know, but if it feels good, maybe it'll do you some good. And this is what I hope might help him a little bit. He got up off the table and stood up perfectly straight. Still perfectly comfortable. First time he'd been able to stand up for 4 months. And he was delighted, but I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe that a comfortable position would do so much better than all the yanking and everything I'd done. Invented half a dozen different ways to hit him and got nowhere with any of them, but we got him in a comfortable position. And bam, he was almost well. I treated him a couple more times, but that's all I had to, really all I had to do for him. And I was so excited about the possibilities of this thing that I couldn't get it out of my head, and I started experimenting with everybody that came in. Fortunately, when you're trying to find a position of comfort for somebody, you don't get mad. If you do it a little bit wrong, or even quite a bit wrong, if you don't hurt them, well, they'll be very patient with you. And I was afraid my patients would catch on to the fact that I was experimenting, but they thought I was very thorough. I didn't tell them. Anyhow, I got away with it, and the rewards of doing it without any more than I knew how to do it were good enough that every day what I did was that much more, and I got a little better at it all the time and tried it on more and more things. And I kept doing this for nearly for a full 10 years before I thought, this stuff is so good, I'm going to have to pass it on to the rest of the guys.
This is the great revelation and the second great aha moment in the history of orthobionomy. And the discovery was that comfort, that's no pain, creates a spontaneous self-correction. And this process, the way he said it, is much like the phase 4 beginners process, which is, do you prefer this or do you prefer that? And you go the way which is the preference. Also, the man had a psoas spasm, right? You heard him say that. And that reflects the central importance of the psoas, which runs through all the phases in orthobionomy. Because when you release the psoas, it promotes self-correction throughout the body. And he said, after 20 minutes, I put him in a, I'll just put the slide back on here. So his description was, after 20 minutes, I got him in a grotesque, funny-looking position with his knees all rolled up and twisted off to one side in a side bend. And I realized that actually this image fits that description exactly, which is our phase 4, L1 and L2 release position, which is also a release for the psoas, release position for the psoas. Also of note in his description of his story is power of sleep. So do your clients fall asleep on the table? Mine do, often. But some people say, well, then he's checking out. But no, I feel that they're checking in. They're checking into a deep resource of restoring power of sleep. And it works like a charm. So as you saw from the talk, Dr. Jones experimented with other patients for more than 10 years before he published his first paper. One of his experiments was on his own daughter, who's named Barbara, and she was 5 years old. She had injured her neck in a Disneyland ride and had been unable to turn her head ever since. Dr. Jones decided to experiment with his new method with his daughter over the mother's concerns, over his wife's concerns. He put Barbara on the table and proceeded to move her in various positions. When her head was in a position of extreme extension, she cried out, "That's the goodest of all!" And her neck pain was gone. So soon he was using his method almost exclusively and rarely using the high velocity, low amplitude techniques of osteopathy. In 1966, 11 years after his discovery, he published his first paper in the Osteopathy magazine called Spontaneous Release by Positioning. This paper changed the life of at least one new osteopath, Arthur Lincoln Pauls, in the UK. Dr. Jones met a lot of resistance from the AAO, the American Association of Osteopathy. In frustration at the lack of acceptance, he began to present his methods to other groups, including massage therapists. So we can see the evolvement into the embracing all happening here. Because of the nature of massage therapists, they could take more time with their treatment, and the application of counterstrain to their patients was instantly successful. Sadly, because he reached out to other therapists, he was even more strongly opposed by the AAO. Finally, in the 1970s, he he was recognized as a fellow of the AAO and received the recognition and respect he deserved. So here is a summary of the ideas contributing to the evolvement of orthobionomy, the trunk of the orthobionomy tree. Number one, natural self-correction occurs spontaneously in comfort. 2, listen and be guided by the body to a position where self-correction takes place, which is a little bit like phase 5, right? 3, look for what feels comfortable, not what hurts. 4, keep on evolving, listen, grow, evolve, be humble and curious. And you could hear from his story how humble that man was to keep, and he kept on developing and evolving his technique for 11 years before he, as he said in the movie, time to share it with the guys, he said, this is what he put there besides positioning, right? So this is interesting. It wasn't just positioning he gave more time for a start. He gave space. He gave safety. And we know that safety now changes the perception of pain just by itself. He really cared about his clients. He was never happy until he had better performance. He really connected. He connected with his clients. And number 6, he expanded it to physical therapists, to massage therapists. So now we go to the canopy of the OB wisdom tree. And Arthur Lincoln Pauls was the developer and founder of a modality called orthobionomy. And such a formidable and creative mind as his insights covers the whole canopy of the orthobionomy wisdom tree. As a young man, he was a driving instructor, photographer, and bodybuilder. And this is a picture of him from his book as a young man in his bodybuilding days. Later, he trained in judo and became a 4th Dan judo instructor. And at that time, he often visited an osteopath for treatments for his injuries. And he made friends with that osteopath who persuaded him and his wife to train as osteopaths. And here's a picture of his wife and children in the UK around the time when they were doing that training. And in his training, he encountered that article by Lawrence Jones. And this is taken from Luann Overmeyer's biography of Arthur. From then on, he dedicated his life's work to the principles of non-force manipulation. So his reading of that article was the 3rd aha moment in the history of orthobionomy. So originally his work was called phased reflex techniques. And he researched and taught his techniques in Canada, USA, Australia, and later France and Europe. And here he is in northern New South Wales in Australia in 1985. And later he separated from his wife and went to live and teach in France and Europe. And here he is with an orthobionomy class in France with his girlfriend Odile Saini. And look how happy the class is. So here are the amazing evolvements and ideas that Arthur introduced to the world. They're listed here, but each one is another aha point and deserves a complete lecture on its own. So we have phase 4. So using Dr. Jones's release positions, the time for self-correction to occur could be reduced from 90 seconds to 10 to 30 seconds using the reflex, compression, or traction. And this created a new healing modality, a complete set of techniques for every joint in the body with no prerequisites required, and you can pick them up with a few classes, four classes actually. And also from his homeopathy influence, the smaller the stimulus, the more powerful. Less is more. Arthur really accented function governs structure, and this changed everything, really. So the osteopathic principle, which is structure governs function, under that heading, this is what Arthur wrote in his book. Structure cannot and will not function properly if it is not used in harmony with the way it was designed to function. And how many people really know how to use their body properly? If we continue to use our body in ways it was not designed for, we break or get worn down. So this idea that use governs the fascia patterns, the compensations, the adaptations, and everything we've done and thought in our lifetime is reflected in our body movement and our body posture. And so body is made for movement. And this brought in exploration of movement. So instead of looking or assessing posture, now you assess the body's capacity to move. So you're looking at movement quality, and you're using rocking, jiggling, circling, figure of eight, spirals, all sorts of different movements for release positions and also for assessment. Another aha moment, isometrics and isotonics. Postural patterns and fascial adaptations can be re-educated by using resistance reflexes. Phase 5. This is what Arthur wrote about phase 5. Phase 5 becomes difficult because we have been taught to do. Be a pure observer. It all evolves from doing nothing. We can go back to that picture of A.T. Stills lying on his bed. By doing nothing, everything can happen. Orthobionomists do nothing better. When all you are doing fails, allow phase 5 to do you instead. And this was discovered. The aha moment for Arthur was when he was working with a client's neck using compression and traction, and it wasn't working. Nothing was happening. There was no release happening in that client's neck. And so he decided he would just stay there, do nothing, and the client's neck spontaneously self-corrected. And famously, he said that this was the beginning of orthobionomy. This was orthobionomy. So your hands, or the hands themselves, touch. There's the use of touch, non-doing touch, just presence. That creates the self-correction. And we have phase 6. So he was aware, and we're all aware that we don't just end where our skin is. There's an electromagnetic field that exists around the human body, and we can feel that. And he gave that the name aura. And he also investigated what is real connection, what is relationship, and he previewed with his research what was later discovered about mirror neurons and the ventral vagus nerve, which is all about connection. And the word that's used in orthobionomy is meeting. You need to meet the client. So in phase 6, you learn to feel this field. So it's non-contact touch that you can feel, and you can feel the self-correction. And then phase 7. So phase 7, we can explore what we know. We know things. And if you read Arthur's book, he knows things all the time. He just knows things. And how we can connect with each other by thought, beyond time and space. So it's about connecting with universal patterns or universal energy. And the evolvement of the original concept after Arthur continues with the discoveries of neuroscience, neurotransmitters that reflect the mood. You know, our nervous system reflects the chemicals that run through it. Pain theory, modern pain theory. What is pain? What makes pain? Polyvagal theory and the autonomic nervous system. Trauma research, which is massive now, getting bigger all the time. Attachment theory and the brain. And it goes on, epigenetics, Alexander technique, somatic experiencing. All of these can be absorbed and used in orthobionomy. So what do you think is the original concept that is evolving? Is it more and more subtle ways to stimulate self-correction? Is that what's evolving? Is it that it's expanding, evolving into every home? Is it that there's more and more knowledge and insight that's evolving and growing, continuing to evolve? Or is it something we have forgotten, say the perfection of the human, of nature, and we are remembering it? Is that what's happening? How does evolvement happen in your practice? What is evolving in your clients? So I'd like to hear any ideas that you may have about what is the original concept. What's evolving in your life? What's evolving in your clients' lives? What's evolving? What is the potential? And I'll open the chat.
Clive, I think self-awareness has evolved in me enormously. So the self-awareness has expanded and continued to expand, and I think orthobionomy has been a vehicle to speed up that journey for me. So yeah, that's my involvement, and I'm enjoying it.
Yes. I agree.